Welcome back to my channel. Okay, let's get into this one right here. You're fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. Yes, people, the race card has backfired on the Democrats. The race card has backfired and caught on fire on the Democrats. Donald Trump, the biggest racist. But wow, look at this. Best friends with the black who of who in Hollywood. Best friends. Wow. History can be unkind. And this is what they do to black people. They keep changing their history, right? You know, because at certain times, certain things was happening. And they were doing certain things at certain times, right? So, you can even see it. You go from Negro to black to African American to Afro American to colored, all this stuff. Why does your identity keep changing? Because they keep changing your history, right? And they'll keep changing it until you're gone. You're gone. Until you're replaced and gone. So, as you can see here, black celebrities and black, what do you want to call it? Black movement people, black coalition people, black civil rights activist people, all love Donald Trump before he became president, right? And you can see right here, you got Don King, you got Jesse Jackson, and you got Muhammad Ali, right? Muhammad Ali, who was people is from Madagascar, and his people are Irish. When you look at his genealogy, they weren't slaves, just like Martin Luther King's people. Martin Luther King was British and Irish, right? And it's funny to me because I thought really black people were slaves like that. I thought my people were slaves like that. I was, in a black movement, the black, this and that, the black struggle and the black, all this stuff. And, I thought my people were slaves. But when I was able to do my genealogy, it's not so true, right? It's not so true. Just like they can't explain to you how black people own 90 million acres of land in the South during slavery, where Confederates endorsed the Confederacy and gave money to the Confederate war machine, and black people sent their children off to the Civil War in the South, right? Master told me not to read any history before Reconstruction. And let me ask, don't say nothing. Let me ask you something. Somebody told me that the word reconstruction means to reconstruct. Is that right? Don't tell nobody I asked you. And also what somebody told me that reconstruction meant that they reconstructed a new history in America. In all history after Reconstruction is a whole different history than the history before Reconstruction. Shh, mass are coming. You guys got to be kidding me, right? So yeah, I really thought my people were slaves and came from Africa. I really thought that, and that's something they really can't explain to you, how all these black people were free up north, were owning businesses, were going to college, had communities, were politicians, were business owners. You got people like the abolitionists, they have say-so in what the government should do, is going to do. Oh, goodness. And how even white slavery just don't exist in America. Even though white people were the biggest slaves for thousands of years, all you got to type in white slavery and you read this and it's like a horror story. You want to cry. It's like a horror story for white people. That's what's so funny. You're going to get chills. You're going to have nightmares. That's all you got to type in, white slavery. And it's going to be bone chilling how these people were enslaved for thousands of years from black people. And what they will tell you is that, because they've replaced the people conveniently in the Eastern Hemisphere. They'll now tell you that Moors were just mixed people or white Arabs, right? But white people were enslaved not only in Europe, but in Asia, but in the Middle East, in America, in Africa for thousands and thousands of years up until when slavery was abolished. Millions of white people. You just got to scratch your head. How were these people enslaving people when they were being enslaved? It's hilarious. But Pastor said, don't go read nothing. Just believe what they say on the TVs. So yeah, you just got to scratch your head at this type of stuff. And why I said white slavery to be spoken about on TV is forbidden, because everything that has to do with slavery is always black, right? Um, and then when you read stuff about slavery, it's like, what, huh? Black people were taking their slave masters to jail. I mean, not to jail, to court for keeping them enslaved for too long, for mistreating them, or taking them out of a slave state. Just all kind of different stuff. They'll tell you the same people who were African slaves with no rights, no money, didn't get paid, suddenly, and no rights, were taking hundreds. The black slaves were taking their owners to court that couldn't read, that couldn't write, that were just slaves. God. You can't make this up, folks. And they really want you to believe this stuff about slavery and how it's been told. How did you get money to take your slave owner to court? What lawyer did you get? What rights do you know? And laws do you know? What rights do you even have as a slave in bondage? It makes no sense. People, this was indentured slavery. There was actually no, every black person that came over here, unless they were POWs of war, well, any slaves really, that came to the United States, came here under a contract, unless you was a prisoner of war, or you were, you broke a law. And they have documentation of every slave ship, every person that was on the manifest that ever came to the United States. And all these black slaves were coming over here with first and last names that were European first and last names. They didn't come from Africa with European first and last names. They were coming over here with European first and last names, mostly English. And then they will sit up here and tell you, so how did they get these first and last names that were not only English, or sometimes they were, they were French, they were British, they were Irish, they were whatever, Egyptian. But the nonsense that they will tell you that black slave owners, they weren't even slaves yet. They weren't even slaves yet, and they came over here with those first and last names from Europe, with their children, a lot of times, with their family, a lot of times. Already came over here with these first and last names: Johnson, Smith, McGregory, Jefferson, Johnson. And they already came over here, if you check the slave manifest, and when they were sold, what they did. If they was a blacksmith, a carpenter, I don't know, a dishwasher, an apprentice, a teacher. I mean, really? And then they got these things called slave payrolls, where they were paying the slaves. Folks, do you really... Mazda said, don't go read nothing pre-construction. It's going to mess up your head. But they will sit here and tell you that the slave master took his family crest of his last name and gave it to these slaves. They will tell you Anthony Johnson, when you look up his name, who was the first slave owners in what was it, like 1620 or something like that? They said that he was an indentured slave, and then he did his slave time, and then he got slaves after that. And they try to cover it up and say he was a slave first. No, he wasn't. He was. There's nothing to prove that he was a slave. That's why they call him colonist, and that um his parents weren't even slaves. It's all bullcrap, man. And people will sit up here and say, "Oh man, yeah, this dude." Blah, blah, blah. Look, bro, I can't help it because you can't read. I can't help it because you can't read the fine print. I can't help it because you want to accept something that they basically are lying about. I can't help it because you don't know what the Civil Rights Act of 1968 said. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 was an act for Indians, right? The Bill of Rights for Indians. The Civil Rights Act of 1968, Martin Luther King, was for Indians, not Native Americans, Indians. A Native American is a person born in the United States. Go look up the definition. A Native American is an immigrant. A Native American, if you're born in Siberia, you can't be indigenous or aboriginal to America, right? You can't be aboriginal and indigenous to two different lands. Huh. So those are Siberian Indians. So the Civil Rights Act of 1968, if you go look it up, it was an Indian Act for Indian people. So they're calling the people who were in the Civil Rights Act bill Indians. My grandmama got Indian hair. I've heard that before. Your grandmama got Indian hair. My grandmama got Indian in her. That's funny. Not the Siberian Native Americans, not Asians, right? Your grandmama got Asian hair? So your grandma, you got Indian in your family, so you got Asian in your family? So you got Mongoloid in your family. Who is that? You had no Mongoloid in our family. Let's get back on the subject. Yeah, so this is what they do. They change history every so many years so people be confused, right? So people be confused about Jim Crow, about how they put Jim Crow on slaves. Imagine that, right? Think about what they're saying. Because a lot of times they don't explain what they're saying. They just say stuff. Listen to what they're saying. They say the Republicans wanted to abolish slavery. The same Republicans that own slaves, not because that black slave owners and white slave owners were getting filthy rich in the South off of indentured slavery, which today we call slavery, and today we only say black people were slaves and not white people, right? But black slave owners and white slave owners were getting filthy rich off of slavery and were getting taxed on basically their business, right? And you had all these companies and universities, they own stock in slave holdings, right? In their companies in slave holdings. So the government was taxing their product, and they also wanted now to tax their slaves. And you got to remember, back then slaves cost anywhere between, I told you, depend on what you did as a slave. Whether you was a carpenter, you was a maybe you was a nanny, maybe you was a teacher, maybe you was a blacksmith, whatever. Those things depended on how much a slave was worth. So it could be anywhere between 300 back then all the way up to 3,200, right? So that's how much they were paying for a slave. So sometimes, just like today, you would need money from the bank to acquire that slave, because if you had hundreds of slaves, 50 slaves, you might not be able to pay for them right off the bat, right? So you would be in debt, and you would, you would get financed. So now the government, the North, wanted these people down south now to pay taxes on their slaves. And the South was like, kick rocks. Kick rocks. We're not going to do it. So basically, that started the Civil War, amongst other things. You got to remember what the North and these abolitionists started doing. They started stealing people from up north and selling them down south so they can cause the Civil War, right? This is what these people do because the people up north did not want to go to war um, about this. They didn't want to go to the Civil War. And eventually it got that scary that they had no choice, right? If you ever seen the movie 12 Years a Slave, in the black guy who was living up north, middle class, in a black neighborhood, and I think I don't know what profession he was, but um, he was a professional at something, some kind of job. Already graduated from college, living in a middle class neighborhood, like thousands of black people, right? And he thought he was doing a business deal with these people. They put something in his drink when he went to the bathroom. He came back. I think they left the restaurant. He got a little bit woozy, and then he passed out. And then they chained him up, and they took him down south. For 12 years, he was screaming and sold him into slavery. He was screaming he was a slave, all this stuff for 12 years. And then finally, the authorities came from up north with his papers proving he wasn't a slave. They had to let him go. So this is the stuff that abolitionists were doing, right? These are your Democrats today, right? This is what your abolition, even though they were Republicans back then, this is kind of stuff they were doing, right? Stealing white people and black people. Of course, they won't put white people. White people is forbidden from having anything bad happen to them. Even though when we just talked about white slavery, this is why they don't want to talk about white people being slaves, because it was the worst thing for thousands of years. And this is why most of your middle countries turn mixed, because the stuff they were doing with their women, which I won't even say on here, but it was horrible what they were doing to white women in Asia, the Middle East, Africa, um, India, stuff like this. Those countries used to be black. So eventually, the people from up north had no choice but to go into the Civil War, right? Because black people, they were refusing to go to war. And we can do a whole piece on that. Abraham Lincoln was basically begging the black community to go to the Civil War to end slavery, and it had nothing to do with black slaves, because in the height of slavery at that time, before the Civil War started, only 1.4 people were even slaves in America, in the United States, right? So thousands of black people were free in the South, and thousands of black people were free in the North. The whole thing had to do with lies. And now the people up north thought they were going to civil war not to be sold into slavery, right? It had nothing to do with freeing those slaves. And the fact was, the North wanted to go to war because the South did not want to pay taxes on their slaves, because they were paying all this money just to get a slave, an indentured slave at that, right? And they were paying them. If you don't believe me, go explain to me how these people were coming out of slavery, black people and white people, and they were getting land, they were getting cows, chickens, and now they were able to buy these expensive slaves right off the bat. Who was giving them this money? How were they able, again, to take their slave master to court for wrong treatment? Y'all got to stop, man. So yeah, the whole race card has. Oh, let's keep going. My fault. So when slavery was over, we all know that the North won, and we get this story about this new Reconstruction story about black people got free from slavery. They were just the only people that were slaves that came from Africa, and basically white people freed them, right? And when we look at this story and we believe this story, after the North won, they put their people in power, because that's what happens when you win the war. You put your people in power. As the United States, who won the Spanish-American War, they put their people in power in Puerto Rico, Guam, Philippines, Cuba, Hawaii. So ever since then, every dictator that's been in power is from the United States. If you go read the treaty, the United States gave Spanish in the Spanish American War gave them $100 million for those countries. Go read the treaties. Master told me don't read nothing. So yeah, so the North put their good old boys in place after the Civil War because they won, and then they put Jim Crow on black people, right? That nobody can explain to you how slaves from Africa that have nothing, can't read, can't write, don't own nothing, are now getting Jim Crow put on them. Makes no sense. I just came out of slavery. I didn't have a pot to piss in. Now you put Jim Crow on me, and now you put KKK on me. Well, how? Why? I don't even have nothing. Why do you hate me? Why are you putting Jim Crow on me? Well, folks, they forget to tell you that they put the North, who are now Democrats now, put Jim Crow on the black people and white people to a degree, because it was for white people too. They put Jim Crow on these people. In it, they said that if you want to own a business, if you want to vote, you now have to register your land with the government, this new government. And if you want to, my fault, if you want to vote or you want to own a business, you have to register your land with the government. Well, and you got to have certain, what do you call it? I forget what the word is, but you basically have to go to school, right? Well, most black people back then told them to kick rocks. We don't want to register our land to you, because to register means to give away, right? So if you register it, now they can tax it. Now they can tax it. And if you get behind on it, now they can put penalties and all kind of stuff on it. And eventually you can lose your land. So most black people back then, they were like, kick rocks, we don't care. And they weren't able to own, a lot of black people weren't able to own businesses, couldn't vote, and all this stuff. Up to the Civil Rights Act, when Martin Luther King basically registered all their land away. And now black people went from owning 90 million acres of land in the South in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, to owning basically no land. But they'll try to act like in the Civil Rights Act that black people weren't voting in the South, which is a lie. Many black people registered their land and were voting, were going to school, and in the North, in the West, in the East. All this wasn't true. That black people weren't voting. It's a lie. What they try to do is, if anything happens to a handful of black people in this country, it has to do with all black people. Right? Black people will take on anybody's history. Something that happened to a black person in 1865 applies to all black people, and they feel sorry for these people. That's what black people do. That's what they've been told to do. When the reality of it is, your family is your family first. If you don't even know the history of your family, who you are, where you come from, who your people were, then how can you call somebody else fam? How can you take in all these people, the stories of all these people? Harriet Tubman is your story. You're taking on this story, and those were your people. Harriet Tubman and the crew was getting paid. After these abolitionists, these Republicans who are Democrats now, were stealing people from up north and selling them down south, they would then get people like Harriet Tubman in the crew to go back there and get them, because the people up north, they were giving them money to go get their people back. So they were playing a game. This is what these Democrats do. That's why I say you can't call you, when people is calling you fam that you don't even know, and you accept that, you're in big trouble. People that will tell you that you have no history in America but slavery, and you will accept it. But yet all these people that's coming into the United States since the Civil Rights Act movement, who are 98% people of color, the immigrants, they have no problem in America. Ain't that kind of funny? Latinos, people from India, people from the Middle East, Even, let's be real, Africans, Jamaicans, Haitians, Barbadians, Bahamians. Why? Where's their racism? I don't understand. So they come to America, where it's the biggest racist place according to Black Americans, but they come here, own businesses, have nice houses, have nice cars, you know, get these jobs. Where's the racism? Because when they talk about racism on TV, they say black people and white people. They don't say white people and Puerto Ricans, white people and Cubans, white people and Dominicans, white people and Indians, white people and Liberians. Where's these people racism? I don't get it. Well, they left racism, right? Because their racism, where they come from, they got racism in their country. It's called colorism, and now they don't have to deal with that no more. Yeah, in those countries, what we call it? They call it colorism and stuff like that. So in those mixed countries, the lighter you are, the better you are. The more you have, the darker you are, the less you are, the less you have. And the funny thing is, all these people are basically the same people. Basically, they're the same people, but they don't like each other because one is lighter, one is darker, but they come from the same people. Now that's racism. That's real racism when you don't even like your own people. I think that would be worse than the racism that black people have in this country. The racism in this country was started by the government, right? And the problem with the racism in this country, black people was always told, just believe in Jesus, don't do nothing, just let white Jesus take care of it. That's the biggest racism in this country. I'm talking about back in the day. Black people were always told, just go read the Bible and love the people that hate you. You know, like Martin Luther King. Um, a guy that most black people who, during the civil rights movement, who weren't in the South, if you look at black business owners in the North, the West, in the East, they hated what Martin Luther King was doing. Because they felt like, okay, if you pass this thing with desegregation, we're done. We won't have no more business in the black community. We're done. So when you look at black communities, they own businesses. If you voted, if you registered your land, you went to school, you did all the proper things so you can vote, then you were okay. And many black people did this. And that's why many black people in their communities own businesses. They had tire shops, they had furniture shops, they had clothing stores, they had tire shops, they had schools, business, you name it, everything. And desegregation, they have restaurants. And this is the thing where they always show you on TV that it was more valuable for black people to go to white people's restaurants and eat their hamburgers because they made better hamburgers and better tomato soup than black people. So all that effort was worth getting sprayed by water hoses, getting ate up by dogs to eat white people's hamburgers. I guess they put better spices on it. Though black people own their own restaurants. These people didn't want to eat with you, didn't want to hug with you, didn't want to get sprayed with water hoses over you. That made no sense to me. And what they were trying to, sell you is that, like, black and white people were supposed to come together in desegregation, and everybody was supposed to buy off of each other, do business with each other. Basically, nobody was going to start loving each other. You weren't supposed to hate each other, but the fact is, when desegregation hit, or you could say integration hit, guess what? When the ball dropped, nobody bought off of black business, and black people were not disciplined to not buy off of other people in terms of, you're not buying from us, you're not buying from our people, so we're not going to buy from you. Nope. Black people were promoted to buy other people's stuff. And just the way it went. No black ownership because black people weren't disciplined enough not to do these things. Spanish people, Indian people, Arab people, white people are disciplined enough not to buy off of black people. That's just a code in their community. They're not going to do it. Asian people, they're not going to do it. And the people who show you this stuff to be undisciplined are your black celebrities. These are the most undisciplined people you ever seen. They're not about black people. If you took all these black celebrities with all this money, and they always scream racism and black this and black that, blah 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 blah. It's all dribble, right? If they took their money and started up drywall companies, construction companies, maybe made bar stools, maybe made carpet, maybe made shoes, maybe landscaping companies, any kind of company that you could ever make glass tables, make TVs, and they just hired their own people, what will we have? Black people will be basically, I wouldn't say they won't be on top, but they won't be under the immigrants. How do people come from somewhere else, from a third world country, have nothing, no hot water, no food, no WIC, no welfare, and they come over here and get in front of you? That just don't even seem, that just don't seem possible. Yeah, but if they really put their money where their mouth was, these black celebrities and all these black people through history that talked about this, black, that, black people would be good. Oh, I done heard the worst of, oh, black people, you can't hire your own people. White people been doing it. I bet you can't tell Asian people they can't hire their own people. I bet you can't tell Spanish people they can't. It ain't something you announce, it's something you do. That's the problem when you look at these Civil Rights Act leaders, right? When you look at Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, what's their biggest problem? And why their plan never goes through and it always fails, basically, right? And it kind of benefits other people, right? When you look at um affirmative action, that's benefited other people of color in this country more than it's benefited black Americans, right? Foundational black Americans. The problem with these people that I just talked about, your Malcolm X, your Martin Luther King, your Al Sharpton, your Jesse Jackson, your Muhammad Ali, your all these government agents that I'm thinking, and there's proof of that, they've always announced their plan to the man and to everybody what they wanted to do. So this is like the Italian mob announcing to the police what they're going to do. You don't see this type of behavior from Indian people, Asian people, Arab people, Spanish people. This is a behavior that just sounds so ludicrous. It sounds ludicrous. You're going to announce your plan to get ahead. And even, what's them dudes called? In the 60s, the black militia. Oh, I forget what they're called. Man, it was so much stuff going back there in the 60s. No wonder when you look at today and you see black people under immigrants, they were fighting to get fair treatment and be on the level with white people. Today, they're under immigrants. That's crazy. But there was so much going on in the 60s that it was a bunch of confusion on purpose. Yeah, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X. Who were these? I forget who these people were. Farrakhan, and I like Farrakhan, right? I like Farrakhan because this is a guy who trashed white people and Jewish people for so long. And about, what was it, about 5 years ago, this guy came out and said he had a white Jewish father. Wow. And you should have known Becky with the good hair and the yellow skin. I mean, this guy didn't even have to perm that hair to get it straight. Anyways, these people go announce their plan publicly on the world stage to everybody, what they're going to do, what they want to do, how they're treat, all this stuff, instead of just taking this same energy and investing it in their people. That's crazy. And like I said, you wonder why the plan never works out. People that come over here don't announce their plan. They just work with their family. They just work with their community. So yeah, this is what you got, man. You got this fake Donald Trump racism, and all these black people that told you Donald Trump and the Democrats told you he was racist, best friends with black Hollywood, black civil rights activists throughout the years. As soon as he becomes a politician, he's a racist. Wow. They continue to play black people. That's all I can say, man. When you're ready to wake up and know your real history of the world, of America, you're fine to do that. If anything, Donald Trump is trying to help black Americans from getting wiped the hell out. Tell me what you think.